You're live.
I'm live. Am I going to be able to see my face? Cool, 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 cool. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to one of the Alaska Raptor Center's live streams. If you've watched any of these before, welcome back. And if you're just joining us, we are going to be doing a little talking about bird anatomy. Before we get into that, though, I do want to remind everyone, if you like what you see here today, or you want to see some excellent bird videos, or pictures of cute birds, or mostly bird things, you can check out our Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok channels, sorry. They are all at Raptor Center.
Raptor.org.
Sorry, I don't handle this. This is handled by someone much more competent. So they are all at They are all at Raptor.org. If you want to look for any of our videos, that is Alaska Raptor Center on YouTube. And of course, we also have our website, which is AlaskaRaptorCenter.org. And it popped up. Great, so you can remember it. So with me today, before we get into our conversation, I am joined by one of our lovely little education birds. She's pretty interested in what's happening. As you can see, she's looking around, getting a notion for what's going on. And her name is Tootsie. She is a northern saw-whet owl, which means she is full-grown at this size. They are just this tiny. She's very interested in what's happening. So they're not gonna get any bigger. In fact, Tootsie here is at least about 8 years old. So she's getting up there for a northern saw-whet. She's one of our old ladies, and Tootsie is here with us because she suffered a wing break. Now, unfortunately, with birds, when they break a wing, it can be very difficult to heal it in a way that they are still capable of having full flight. In the case of Tootsie here, we did try and pin the bone, but it was actually so small that we couldn't get a pin small enough. We even used a little blunted sewing needle, and that was still too big compared to her wing. Where you going, baby? So Tootsie here is unable to fly. That would leave her in a very poor state for hunting her food, as well as avoiding predators, because these little owls will get predated on. So she stays here at our center. She has a very good relationship with our receptionist. They talk a lot. Tootsie talks to her and they talk back. So she gets an easy life here at the Raptor Center. And we're good. So today what I am going to be talking about are bird beaks. We do find beaks in other parts of the animal world. For example, turtles have beaks, squids have beaks. Even on Team Mammal, we've got the duck-billed platypus. But beaks on birds are incredibly unique structures that do a lot to help them acquire their food and just live their day-to-day life. One of the coolest things that I find for bird beaks is they're actually a lot more mobile than our own jaws are. So you can kind of see in the picture, over here. The bottom jaw and the top jaw attach in different places. So most birds have full movement over those jaws. You can see in this picture just a natural bird skull instead of a diagram. So back near the eyes where they attach, instead of having big, heavy jaw muscles like we do, because a lot of what a bird has is gonna need to be lightweight so they can keep flying. Instead of these big, heavy jaw muscles, their bones connect at the back for the bottom jaw, and then up here a little bit for the top jaw. And so the pressure that they exert with these jaws is based off of more of like a pliers. So it's that force of pressure instead of that strength of the muscle. Oh, sorry, you did. Sorry. Technical issues. So here in comparison is our wonderful human skull. You can see that bottom jaw, of course, is mobile. We can move it around, shake it, jump it. But unfortunately, our top jaw is part of our skull, so we can't do much with that. With birds, however, since they have this mobility in the bottom and the top jaw, they are able to apply a lot more force. And believe it or not, this little dude right here is considered to have one of the strongest forceful bites in all of bird kingdom. That is the Galapagos finch. And comparatively, it's a little difficult to judge because, of course, this is a tiny bird. You're also a tiny bird. There you go, baby. Okay, we're good. So this is a very tiny bird. An animal might have a stronger jaw force, but if they're a larger animal, it's a little tricky to measure. In terms of this bird, however, if it was the same size as a Tyrannosaurus rex, one of its ancestors, it would actually have a bite strength that is 320 times stronger. This bird, however, is just going to use its bite strength for cracking open nuts and getting other food like that. Now, a bird that might have, people might be a little bit more experienced with their bites is, of course, parrots. Parrots are known for having a very, very strong bite. They also are using those jaws to crack open nuts and eat the meat out from the middle of it. And if you've ever met someone who has worked with both parrots and birds of prey, I would hazard a strong guess that they would much prefer to be bitten by a bird of prey. To put it in a little bit of perspective, when we measure jaw strength, we can use force over area, which gives us the pressure in square inch, about how much pressure you can apply in each square inch. Humans have a PSI of about 162-ish PSI. So we got pretty strong jaws. We can clamp down pretty well. Parrots can have anywhere from 400 to 500 PSI. So people who own parrots need to be very careful, knowing what their bird needs, and especially the temperament of the bird. Because of course, if you got a nice docile bird, you're not going to have to worry about the bites too much. The birds in this picture, the blue and gold macaws, they are known for being a little bit more bitey, and their PSI comes in at about 400. So to anyone who owns one of these parrots, I'm very impressed and also terrified. Now, got very quiet. Bird beaks in general are very, very dependent on what that bird is going to be eating, to the extent that you can look at a beak and get a good idea of what that bird is going to be eating just based off of their beak. One other really neat feature that bird beaks can have, you can see in this picture here, this is called rhynchokinesis. If anybody else knows how to pronounce that, feel free to share it. We looked it up, so hopefully it's right. But what it basically means is not only do birds with rhynchokinesis have mobility in their top and bottom jaw, as all birds do, but that top beak can get even more mobility. They can lift it up a little bit. So you'll see this in cranes, storks, sandpipers. It's thought that they use this top mobility to kind of grab their food when they're probing in the dirt. Now you might think, oh, I know a bird that probes in the dirt. Oh, whoops. So for example, this oyster catcher, these are birds that have rhinokinesis. They're going to stick their beak all the way down in the dirt, and that little mobility that they have with the top beak is going to help them grab onto things like larvae, little shelled creatures, and anything else that they might want for their supper. As I was saying, you might think, oh, I know a bird that has a long probing beak. The kiwi, found in New Zealand. Oddly enough, this bird does not have rhinokinesis. What they do have, though, is their nostrils at the very tip of their beak. So while they might not share the mobility that other birds have, they're still pretty impressive little birds with their beak structures. Oh, sorry, Tootsie. I don't think she likes looking at the beaks. You're okay. There we go. You want to stay on my hand? Yeah? Doing it one-handed. All right. So while kiwis don't have this rhinokinesis, there is actually another bird that does, and it's kind of interesting because as far as I can find out, we're not sure why it has it. And that is the hummingbird. They're not really grabbing a whole lot with that beak. Instead, they're using that long, slender beak to drink nectar out of flowers, and yet they also have rhinokinesis. And the hummingbird is also the proud owner of the longest beak in the world. This is a beautiful picture of a sword-billed hummingbird. Their beak is much, much longer than their body. And if you're able to kind of piece together what this bird might be eating, they are, of course, like other hummingbirds, going to be feeding off of nectar, but the flowers that they eat from are incredibly long. So they're long tubular flowers. So that bird needs to use that long beak, just like a straw, and get right to the base of the nectar. Moving on to some other very interesting, amazing beaks, we have the crossbill. So one of the other things that I find fascinating about birds is they can go after the same kind of food, but in different ways. The crossbill is probably one of the most unique beak features that you'll see. You can see in the picture, their beak crosses. They got a good name. They are the crossbill. Their beak crosses over. And that kind of scissor shape that their beak forms is going to be incredibly useful when it comes to picking out seeds from pine cones, which is what the majority of their diet is. Just again to compare, parrots do also eat seeds and nuts, but they're not going to be delicately just tugging out those little seeds in the pine cones. Instead, they're going to be finding very strong, heavy-shelled seeds and nuts and cracking them open. So you can see just how big that beak is, and I can't stress this enough, get an appreciation for how strong a parrot bite is. In comparison, moving on to some of our birds that are going to be eating other food items that they'll find. You doing okay? Yeah. This beak belongs to a woodpecker. Woodpeckers are known for hammering on trees to go after larvae and other grubs. So you can see they've got a very nice, strong beak. The top is even a little bit pushed out over the bottom, and they've done some studies that show that that actually helps reduce the force for when the woodpecker is hammering on that tree. Otherwise, they would be in a lot of trouble. Their brain would be liquid. But one of the neat things... Oh.
She's stressing her.
She's getting a little stressed. Are you stressing or a pellet? We'll see. Oh, sorry about that. We do always want to make sure our birds are having a positive experience. When Tootsie does that little throat fluttering, it can mean that she's a little stressed out. So we're just going to keep an eye on her. If she continues to show some stress, we'll probably let her go back and have her mouse. But for now, she's recovered. Yeah, good girl. You let me know if she does it again. So in comparison to the woodpecker, who's using their beak basically just like a large hammer slamming into that tree going after everything, we've got the wren, who is also an insect eater, but these little birds are going to be going after much smaller bugs. So think your flies, your gnats, and they're also very likely to catch them as they're flying. I can't tell if it's a pellet or not.
It looks like a pellet.
So when she stretches out her neck like that, a lot of times it means she has a pellet that she's trying to cough up.
Well, while we're deciding real quick, someone asked what material are beaks made out of?
Oh, that's an excellent question. What material are beaks made out of? So beaks are covered in a keratin sheath, the same thing that our fingernails are going to be made out of. Underneath that keratin sheath, there is a bony bit. I can show you. Oh yeah, maybe she's hot, because I'm a little hot. Yeah. So underneath that keratin sheath, which is this darker coloration, there is a bony structure as well that has blood vessels in it. So the beak is very much part of the bird's face. If they injure just the keratin, it can grow back, just like our fingernails can. But if they injure any of the bone structure underneath, then they are in big trouble. With our birds that we have here at the Raptor Center, we actually have to manage this keratin sheath, and we call it a beak cure. We basically just trim it up with clippers. We'll use a Dremel to make sure that our birds retain the shape that they need for eating. If we didn't, it would continuously grow. In the wild, birds are able to avoid any problems with too long of a beak, generally by getting food that has a lot more bones in it. They're gonna rub their beak on rocks and branches, and generally that's the way they keep their beak trim and short. With our birds here, we do the best we can to mimic their natural habitat, but often, as it turns out, they are getting such a highly nutritious diet every single day that their beaks and talons as well grow very, very fast. So about twice a year, we take them into our clinic and we give them a little beak cure. I don't know how I feel about her doing this. Did you stop again, or are you still going? You stopped again? All right, let's see if she's going to be okay with us cooling down a little bit. That might help. So moving on from birds that, while they do hunt animals, might not be considered as impressive as birds that hunt non-insects, we have the raptor family. All right, we are gonna be putting little Tootsie Toots away here. I'm sorry that we're not able to have her out for longer, but she is just a little nervous here. So we're just gonna go. Because while we do train our birds to be comfortable, we want to make sure if they're not comfortable that we are listening to them. Otherwise, we are not going to have a lot of trust built up. And when you're working with wild animals, you really got to make sure you got that trust. All right. So, raptors. Raptors, as I said earlier, their bite is not really as scary as a parrot bite because they're not using their beaks to do a lot of crunching and grinding and cracking open nutshells. Instead, they're using their beak a lot more like silverware, in that when a raptor is going after their food, they are going to rip up pieces of meat with that beak. So the really crucial part for a raptor beak is going to be that sharp point on the end of it. In fact, that's one of the features that we would consider if we're wanting to know if a bird is a raptor or not. Of course, there's other factors as well, but that pointy beak is a really strong start. That beak is not as strong in the very back corners. So if anybody watched our video where we were trimming up an eagle's beak, you might have noticed we have our thumb in the very back corner of their mouth. That, because again, is where it's going to be the weakest for pressure, and we can actually keep that open. I would not do that with a parrot. Now, even among the raptors, there are certain groups that have really extraordinarily just amazing features on their beaks. Nature is amazing. I can't stress that strongly enough. There's just something about it that how it came to be, I will never know, but it's there. So one of those groups is the falcons. You probably know the peregrine falcon from fast fame. There's also the American kestrel or the merlin. But one trait that makes a falcon is the existence of this toenail tooth. Right there. Oh no, can you go back? Sorry, I need to give a better signal. So this toenail tooth is the little triangle bit behind the pointy bit of the beak. And that little triangle bit is super, super crucial when it comes to hunting time for the falcon, because the falcon, unlike a lot of other raptors, will actually kill their prey mid-air. So a lot of raptors, when they hunt, they're going to drive their prey down to the ground and then do the dirty work. But for falcons, they're going to grab their prey out of the middle of the air, and they use that toenail tooth to sever the spinal column. So it fits really well with vertebrae, and they can just snip it, and then they can keep on flying and eating their meal. All right, next one, please. Of course, we can't leave out the owls. Their beaks are much like other raptor beaks. They've got that sharp, sharp point to it. One of the interesting things, though, I think with owls is their beak looks incredibly tiny for their body size. That's because the rest of their face is going to be covered in these long, fine feathers that they're going to use pretty much like sensory organs. So an owl, as you can maybe see from the eyes here, does have excellent vision, but not when it's up close. So when that owl goes to find their food, they're going to put their beak down near their food and kind of brush along with their little feathers, and that way they're going to be able to find it. One of my other favorite things about owls is because they look like they have a tiny, tiny beak, they are a little terrifying when they eat a large piece of prey. But as you can see in the photo, just because the visible beak is very small, it doesn't mean the mouth is small. Owls have a large, stretchy mouth. Next one, please. Now, moving on from our raptors, we still have some meat eaters who are here to show off their amazing beak types. This photo is of a black skimmer. They have a really unique beak structure in that the bottom of their beak is longer than the top of their beak. So this is not an injured animal. This is the way it's supposed to look. Because when they go flying, they are going to skim the bottom beak along the water and use that to kind of catch up fish and other food items into their beak. We're on fish now. But just because you're eating fish doesn't mean you need to have a beak like a black skimmer. You could also go the heron route. I know it's backwards, but I can't figure it out. So herons have a long, narrow beak, and they're going to be mostly hunting by just jabbing down on their prey. So they use this beak to snap down and grab it, and then they're able to hold it very securely in their beak and swallow it down. So herons are kind of like spear fishermen, while skimmers are more like net fishermen. In comparison, we also have loons. These are also fish-eating birds, and I include them just to show how amazing it is that all these birds are eating the same food, remember. Different sizes maybe, but all fish, and they're all eating it in different manners. So the loon also has a pointed beak, but it is much, much shorter, and that's because the loon does what's called pursuit hunting. So while the heron tends to stand still and make lightning strike jabs, the loon is going to actually swim and chase after their food. So they need a shorter beak so they can navigate the water, but they still need that nice little stabby bit to it so they can go after their food. I'd be remiss if I did not include the wonderful goose. They also live on the water. That's my connection. And geese have really, really interesting beak structures because they actually have these little ridges inside the beak. I can show you a picture there. So it can make them look a little scary. Sometimes people call them teeth. As you can see, they're not really like teeth, they're more just little ridges. But the way the geese are going to use these to help get their food items is pretty much the same way that we would put pasta in a strainer. So the geese are going to scoop up a big mouthful of water, and then they're going to close their beak and kind of shake their head about. And as they shake their head about, all the delicious plants and little bugs are going to stay trapped in their beak, while the water is going to siphon out between these ridges. These actually do hurt to get bitten by. Say like goose is more than eagle, really. It's very pointy. Next one. I also have to include one of my favorite birds. We've seen a lot of beaks that are very specific for a certain kind of food, but that doesn't mean that all birds only hunt one kind of prey item. And this beak is a great example of what we would call a generalist. A generalist is any kind of animal that is going to hunt generally everything. They typically are omnivores, so they're going to be going after both meat and fruit, and they tend to do a really great job of surviving just because they don't need to rely on a single food item. And in this picture here, oh, sorry, go back. I gesture so much, and poor Richard is going off my hand gestures. Sit on my hands. So in this picture here is the beak of a common raven. Now, you might not really see anything specific about it, and that is because, again, they have that generalist beak. So it's a little pointy on the end. That's useful for when the raven needs to really jab at stuff. But overall, the only really special thing they've got about their beak is that it's incredibly strong, and they're able to use it to manipulate stuff. So the raven's beak is pretty much like a Swiss Army knife. If they need to just slam through something, they can slam through it. If they need to very delicately pull something apart, they can do that too. Otherwise, they are up for pretty much anything. Right, next. How are we doing on time? Now, moving on, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the diets that these birds have and how they use their amazing beaks to have them.
Before we segment that, can we ask one question?
Yes, but questions first since I'm changing topic.
The one question we've been asked a couple of times is, what about a bald eagle's bite? What
about a bald eagle's bite? So if a bald eagle gets you with the tip of their beak, that sharp point, it's probably going to draw blood just because it is so sharp. But on the other side, because it is so sharp, it's not really going to hurt that much because it's like being stabbed by a needle. Incredibly sharp. There's not a lot of pain. And when the bald eagles do tend to bite, they tend to bite just with that tip, because when a bald eagle is biting, it's not their real form of defense. When we work with our bald eagles, the bit we're always worried about is their feet, because in the wild, that's what they would use as their weapon, those amazingly strong, strong feet. Biting is something they do when they're in the clinic and they're frightened, but it's not something that is really in their brain to inflict a lot of damage, and it really isn't. Compare again to the parrots, which are used to using their beaks to slowly crack things open. So while parrots maybe won't draw blood as often, although they do still have that very sharp beak to help get little meats outside of the nut, with a behavior, parrots are much more likely to slowly compress your finger to the point of the bones are not great anymore. So yeah, most raptor bites, not great, but not that bad. Actually, our smallest raptors really hurt because they tend to twist a lot.
Also, as we move into feast, I'm going to point out that the moment that we put Tootsie out there, she coughed up a pellet.
Oh, you were right, it was a pellet. So I've just been informed that when we moved our little solid owl up front to let her feel more comfortable, she did cough up a pellet. So those stressors that she was showing were just because she had a pellet in her throat. She tricked us. So moving into some of the amazing diets that these birds can have, because if you stop and think about it, there are around 10,000 different species of birds in the world. Some of them are generalists like ravens. Some of them are incredibly specific when it comes to what they're eating. And I tried to find birds in Alaska because that's where we live. So this bird over, no, go back, no. I'm trying to gesture to the picture. I'm so sorry, Richard.
You're okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, friends. So this bird in the picture here is a storm petrel. And they get their name because a lot of times they're found around storms. These little birds are going to be living out in the ocean. You don't often see them. But when a storm comes on, they will often think that the pavement, the wet pavement from all the rain, is actually water. And then they land on it. And unfortunately, due to the way that their legs are set up, they can't really take off from land. They need a running start, and they need to be in the water for that. But the reason that we're having these little birds here today is because they are very extraordinary in the fact that they actually eat oil. So when we get them in the center, it can be pretty tricky to rehab them. We often end up having to tube feed them. But these little birds will fly around and they use that tube on top of their beak, that's their nostrils, to smell out dead mammals, essentially. And so they'll find these super delicious, decaying bodies in the ocean. They skim down along the water and they just scoop up the oil as they go about their day. And then when that oil comes out, if they are trying to feed their babies, it is about fluorescent orange. So they actually have day glow regurgitation. Our next little birdo. Our next bird is this wonderful ptarmigan. They're a little grouse-like species that tend to hang up out in the mountains. I haven't seen them yet, but I'm still hoping every day. The reason that we have these birds here today is because right around the time when things start freezing and thawing every day, people start to notice ptarmigans that are acting very, very strangely. And that is because these birds really like to eat berries. And what happens is when berries freeze and then thaw, sugar starts to ferment. And so at a certain time of year, you can see these little birds walking around and they're basically drunk off of berries. Yeah. I also included the gull, not because I ran out of birds, but because I feel like the gull is an unsung hero and they need some good talking about him, basically. So gulls are generalists. As you probably know, you can find them pretty much anywhere and they will eat pretty much anything. That in itself is kind of amazing that they have adapted to living both on land and finding food there, as well as still retaining a lot of their oceany ways. And much like the owl, their beaks can be very deceptive based on what their actual mouth is. So the picture in here is a gull that has found a sea star. It is happily snacking down. And you might think there's no way that gull is going to eat that whole sea star, but it actually does, because again, much like the owl, gulls have a very deceptively large mouth. This is also because, like all bird beaks, the front portion of the mouth is going to be that bony sheath covered in keratin, while the back portion back here is going to be the skin of their body. So they're able to open their mouth to extravagant sizes and swallow pretty much anything. That's the last picture. The last little bird that I want to mention today is called an American dipper, sometimes known as a water oxel, I believe. That's another word I have read but not actually heard. And the reason that I like to feature these birds is not necessarily that their beak is very unique. You can see they've got a very nice, small little generalist beak. That tends to be the beak you're going to find on insect eaters, which is the case of this little dipper. But I feature this bird because the way they go to get their insects is pretty extraordinary based off of other songbirds. So instead of finding little midges and flies, this dipper will actually go swimming in the water and eat larvae and other little aquatic bugs that they can find. To the point that the dipper will actually swim down to the bottom of the stream bed and start moving and walking along the rocks, turning them all over, and while they're searching for their food. So even though this bird is incredibly, incredibly small, they are kind of finding a new niche for them to find their insects in. This does, however, leave them at a little bit of a disadvantage because not only do they have to worry about like mammals preying on them, they also have to worry about fish eating them. It does happen. And I believe that is the last of the photos we have.
We do have some great questions.
And we have some questions.
A couple of those.
Yeah, I like to answer questions.
So the first one that we have up on here is, have you ever been bitten by a bird?
Have I ever been bitten by a bird? Yes. Yes, let's see. I've been bitten by a falcon, an owl, an eagle, a goose. Oh, rose-breasted grosbeak. That was probably the worst. It's their jaws are for opening nuts, and so very, very pinchy. Basically, when in doubt, if a bird uses its beak to open nuts, stay away from the beak.
How do stronger bird beaks compare to dogs and alligators?
How do stronger bird beaks compare to dogs and alligators? You know, I couldn't say for certain for dogs. I'm not sure what their bite strength is. When it comes to alligators, alligators do have a stronger bite strength when it comes to biting down. They have the advantage of those big, heavy muscles to help produce more strength when they bite down. Alligators, however, when they open up, are quite weak, so they can't bite as well. So a comparison for that is the Nile crocodile actually has the highest PSI. It's about 5,000. So they beat birds in that regard.
Is there any consistency in beak color and how or what they eat?
Ooh, beak color based off what they eat. That is a really good question. As of yet, there has not been any connection found. The only bird that I can think of that changes a color based on what they eat are cedar waxwings, and that's only the very tip of their wing. The feather color will differ based on what they're eating. But for the most part, why some beaks are yellow, some beaks are black, some beaks are orange, I haven't found any research saying why that might be other than just change happens.
Does it hurt if they break their beak?
Does it hurt if they break their beak? I would imagine that it is pretty painful. Like I said, there are blood vessels in that beak, there are nerve endings in that beak. So if they break it, it'd be about the same as breaking any part of our bones. The tricky thing with broken beaks is if that bony sheath has been damaged, like if the bird has lost that whole section of beak, it's not going to come back. They can, of course, be an education bird. There's been some great advances in 3D printing where people will actually print out part of a beak to help fix the bird, but that's not something that would be viable for a wild animal. So when we get birds in, if they have injured that bony sheath, then we have to get our vet on board and try and figure out what we're going to do with that bird.
Someone asked if they could see the owl skull up a little bit closer to the eye sockets.
Yeah. So here.
And then with that, do owls tear their food or eat it whole?
The question of do owls tear their food or eat it whole? So like raptors, they do have this sharp point to the end of their beak that they can use to rip their food into pieces. However, as you saw in that photo, the size of the pieces do not need to be very small. So when it comes to eating, owls typically will swallow the largest size possible. This is a great horned owl beak, I know from experience and from our great horned owls, they can swallow whole mice, they can swallow whole rat heads, they can swallow whole rabbit feet. So they got a lot of space there.
Someone asked, what is your favorite bird to get bitten by?
My favorite bird to get bitten by is probably a duck, because it doesn't hurt very much.
Then someone asked, what is PSI?
Oh, sorry. So PSI is going to be the pressure per square inches. So it's an equation where pressure equals the force over the area, and it's a general way of describing how much pressure an animal is exerting, or anything really. It is a little deceptive in that if you've got something really, really small that's really strong, it's going to have an incredibly high PSI.
And then someone asks if you know your bird count for birds seen.
My bird count for birds seen?
How many birds have you seen?
Oh no. I feel a little ashamed because I don't remember it. My bird count for birds seen, I regret to say that I have fallen off of good birding habits and I'm not recording as well as I should be. I will say I've lived in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Florida, Mexico, and now Alaska. And in all of those places, birding is still one of my top priorities. So I've got a pretty good amount. I can't give a number though. Over 100 maybe?
Do you know what the biggest species of falcon is?
The largest species of falcon, I believe, is the gyrfalcon. Yeah?
Yep, then we're caught up.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. The largest species of falcon is going to be the gyrfalcon. Just like the other falcons, they're going to have that little tomial tooth. And I believe that is all the questions that we have for today. If you think of any more questions, feel free to email me, hannah.blinky@alaskaraptor.org. Again, feel free to check out our lovely, lovely social media sites. Our website's at the bottom. And you can also find us on Twitter and YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. We're all over the place. And I also wanted to mention before we head off that next week we are going to be doing a 5-day fundraiser that is going to be making up for our annual fundraiser that normally happens. So typically, every year we have a really big, amazing fundraiser. There's costumes, there's food, it's great. This year, because of safety concerns, we are not doing that. Despite the fact that it is our 40th anniversary. So instead, we're doing a couple of events online, and if you're interested in those, definitely keep your eye out on this channel, and you'll be able to see all the things we're doing. Friday, there's going to be an extra special treat. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.